Hi there, my name is Mike and I am one of the in-house education consultants here at the Profs. And in today's video, with it coming now into the middle of autumn, we're starting perhaps now to think about Oxbridge interviews. So we're going to be putting out quite a few videos over the next few weeks in relation to different subjects. Now, as I'm in charge of really the sciences and mathematics, I've got a few select subjects that we're going to be talking about in the next few videos. In this particular one, we're going to be talking about computer science, and more specifically, computer science at Cambridge. So if this applies to you, make sure you give this a like and subscribe if you want to hear more information. Leave a comment in the comment section if you have any further questions, because I wish I can cover everything in this time, but unfortunately, as time is limited, I can only really give so much information. However, I've compiled together my top 5 tips on how you can best prepare for this type of an interview. So I hope these are going to be really, really useful to you moving forward with your application. Now, my very, very first tip is a very essential one. We have to understand the structure of an interview like this. And there are 2 types of interviews that you could possibly get when it comes to computer science. One is perhaps going to be focused more on mathematics, and another one is perhaps going to be focused on algorithmic thinking. In both of those interviews, you might have a little bit of questions at the beginning, asking about your personal statement or about your studies in general, anything that you've read. So we'll get into the specifics of how to respond to that a little bit later. But what I really, really want to emphasize is that the actual number of interviews that you will get will vary depending on your college that you are having your interview with. In particular, though, if you know that you are going for maybe a more popular or a larger college, or perhaps a college that has more sort of history or is a bit more pristine, I probably would be more prepared for the fact that there will be maybe a few interviews that you're going to have there. And the reason why they might have multiple is just to really evaluate you 100% in terms of your overall academic profile and your sort of suitedness for a place at that particular college. I should disclose, if you don't end up doing as well as you would like in the interview, you can sometimes be put into, or I should correct myself, not sometimes, often, you are often put into a pool of other applicants. And basically what a college of your choice does is it says, we are not able to take on this student, but we still think they are a very, very good candidate for this subject. Are there any other colleges that are willing to admit this student into their ranks? And if you are still a good enough student, then you should still, in theory, be able to get onto the course. So if you don't get into the college of your dreams, don't worry about it. But in particular, if you know what college you're going to be having your interview at, then it tends to be a very good indicator as to how many interviews you might have. But in general, I would prepare for maybe a maths interview and a computer science interview. We're going to get a little bit more specific now, going into tip number 2 with what interviewers look for. So obviously, they're going to be looking at your problem-solving abilities. They're going to be assessing, generally speaking, for your ability to be able to break problems down into smaller chunks, like this idea of compartmentalization, and be able to sort of talk about what you're doing via an analytical context. The ability to communicate your thoughts and ideas is very important in every interview. Even if you knew absolutely everything and you were to go into an interview, you probably would not do very well in an Oxbridge interview because you're not communicating your thoughts and ideas. You're not letting the tutor sort of into your headspace, and they're not able to help you in the way that they possibly can do. In fact, that's one of the amazing things about Cambridge supervisions, is that in a one-on-one setting, you do have that ability to be able to ask world-renowned experts in their field questions on very, very challenging topics, and they get to work with you very, very closely on some really interesting problems. Now, I mentioned as well, we're also looking at algorithmic thinking. So I would be prepared in lots of those situations to respond to maybe like changes in sort of model assumptions or ideas there. So for instance, I think I saw an interview question one time where they were looking at, I think it's a very famous type of problem, not sure what the name of it is off the top of my head, but this idea that you have a fisherman, not a fisherman, or like a rower with a sheep and a wolf, and another animal, and you can only take one animal across a river at one time, and you're having to try to bring all animals from one bank to another bank. Well, what if we added more variables into that? How would we perhaps create an algorithm that would be able to find the least number of moves possible under certain conditions to actually fulfill that objective? Now, this is something that is almost workshopped in the middle of an interview. So be prepared for unexpected changes. They kind of want you to have a moment where you're not 100% sure, but you're not afraid of maybe suggesting ideas or at least giving your baseline observations of what is going on. And in theory, if you're really, really struggling, then they should help you, definitely. But even if you don't know, it's still a really, really good idea to say exactly what your thought processes are in response to a question that they give, particularly when the questions themselves are going to be very unexpected. Now, another thing I'm also going to mention as well, my tip number 3, reread over that personal statement that you wrote that got you this interview in the first place. But then also looking over past TMUA papers. And I'm also going to recommend another one to look over from time to time. It is the CSAT. Now, this is a test that is only really run by Trinity College nowadays as part of their interview process. And these have slightly more challenging questions than what is proposed on the TMUA. They don't really necessarily have like any questions surrounding logic as much, but they do have some questions on algorithmic thinking. And then they also have other questions in relation to sort of abstract mathematical ideas or concepts. Nothing, again, sort of far removed from your high school studies up to that point. But what I would say, even if you don't have to take the CSAT, still go through a few practice papers now and again, because it offers some really, really valuable sort of exercises and experiences in critical thinking. And actually, I'd say that's the golden thing that admission tutors are looking for, is your ability to be able to deconstruct information and then come up with maybe an idea or an algorithm or a calculation or a derivation that is logically going to make sense to you, that you know is going to work in reaching the objective you need to make. I'm choosing my words very, very carefully because I'm trying to make this work with both mathematics and computer science at the same time. And a great way of doing that is just continuing to go off that. But a reason I'm saying as well to look over that personal statement is they will ask questions, possible. Well, not always, but you should be expected to answer questions surrounding what you put down in your personal statement. They are looking at you being honest with your progress, definitely. It doesn't make sense to sort of extrapolate or like hyperbolize what you've written down or hyperbolize based off what you've written down in your personal statement. You want to be honest with where you are in your reading of different things. You still want to continue reading the text that you started with. They might well ask whether you've gone on to sort of explore anything further. I think they want evidence as well that you haven't just worked for that personal statement to get that amazing, that you're naturally like this all the time. So unfortunately, you're not quite done with your application, really, with everything that you're doing after sending the personal statement. Go over every single point that you've done there. Try to come up with a list of questions that you think an admissions tutor, I would say like a tutor at Cambridge, but even possibly somebody like myself, if you were working with me, come up with a list of questions that you think would be, that you think could be asked of you in order to expand on information you weren't able to fully write about as part of your UCAS personal statement. And then the next tip number 4, is review sample questions that actually appear in these interviews. There's a few ways that can happen. So a lot of different colleges at Cambridge host their own practice interviews in a variety of different subjects. So I recommend you actually just type into YouTube, sample computer science interview Cambridge, and you'll find quite a lot of interviews from many different universities. And you can kind of see sort of how they are generally structured and how they should be organized, which is going to give you some level of confidence in getting ready for something like this. Of course, that doesn't beat the real thing of actually practicing live with someone, but at these early stages, it's good for you to, at the very least, understand sort of how they operate, but also seeing that in practice. On top of that, there is a lot of books out there that have loads of sort of interview questions in regards to computer science. One thing I am going to recommend actually is that you do invest in some recommended reading, but not to further your understanding of a subject, but to look into the typical questions that could come up in an interview. And it's very easy to exhaust them if you've already seen them before. A nice book that I could recommend is The Ultimate Oxbridge Interview Guide. That actually goes over lots of different subjects, but I think you can get books that are specific to just computer science questions as well. Those are really, really good resources. On the mathematics aspects of things, step 2 and step 3 questions, if you really want to challenge yourself, are good to go through. But when getting ready for an interview and going over those questions, you want to, instead of writing it down on a bit of paper, you want to record yourself actually speaking out loud what you are doing, which is going to be very, very strange, obviously, because you're not speaking to anybody. But what, again, you are doing in an interview is you are speaking your mind and you are speaking your thoughts. You need to get into the habit of doing that sooner rather than later if it's something you haven't done before. So for instance, if I was trying to solve a quadratic equation, looking at a really simple example here, I would say, well, first, just because I think it's not obvious visually looking down at the quadratic that we can already read the roots from this, what I'm going to do is complete the square. And by completing the square, I can move this from one side of the equation to the other. I can rearrange this square root where necessary to be able to get 2 roots that I need. Now, what I've just done there is I've explained my process of solving something. And I'd like you to be able to get into that habit of doing that with both mathematics and computer science, whether it be in maybe proving something or deriving something mathematically, or constructing your own algorithm in order to meet a particular objective. But do record yourself, actually watch that over. And if you are thinking to yourself, well, I can't understand what I'm saying or what I'm talking about, that's usually a good reason to maybe take a bit more time to explain further what your thoughts and ideas are. Do start that sooner rather than later. My final tip, just to be able to wrap up everything, is actually hire an admissions tutor like myself, who is, very, very experienced in working with students actually applying for universities like these. Having already been to Cambridge myself, I understand how competitive it is as an environment. I know exactly what tutors are looking for when it comes to taking students on, and I'll be more than happy to help somebody, perhaps like yourself, if you are applying for computer science at Cambridge. If the interview is something that they're not sure about and is something they need to understand a little bit more on, whether that be just in terms of general structure, sort of how to behave, what to wear. I know we haven't really talked about like the big stereotypes with these interviews. Again, I've only got so much time to be able to give in this video, but I'm happy to talk about a lot of these things, as well as provide a little bit of interview practice, as well as many of the other tutors here in a similar subject area. I'm very, very happy to be able to assist where possible in making sure that you have the best chance at passing an interview at Cambridge for computer science. So I'm sad to say we've come to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to like and subscribe in order to hear the latest information about university applications as well as tutoring services. If you have any questions yourself or any opinions about how some of these things are working, make sure to leave a comment in the comment section, or even share it with a friend or family member if you think they might be interested. But if you want to hear directly from us, have a look at the contact information on screen right now. And as always, best of luck with your application.